Tyler Hoover here from Hoovy's Garage, filling in for Steve Bignante on his YouTube channel as he continues his health struggles. And the best thing you can do is watch this video along with a few others, his older ones that you just want to go back and revisit. So when he does come back to us, he can pick up right where he left off and not lose any momentum and maybe gain a few subscribers if you haven't subscribed already. I'm just going to fill in for a little bit, and I am nothing compared to Steve Bignante when it comes to junkyard knowledge. And, well, most of my knowledge is with newer cars, which is why I was drawn to this 2002 BMW 745i. A little over 20 years old, the very first of this chassis of 7 Series that was revolutionary, but there are a lot of them finding their ways in the junkyard because of the mechanical complexity and all of the issues. So this car replaced the legendary E38 7 Series BMW, and it was a huge departure from any BMW that came before it. It was designed by Chris Bangle, and that's where you get the term Bangle Butt when it came to the rear end of this thing. Because of the design, a lot of people thought it was absolutely hideous, but it certainly has aged to where most modern sedans sort of look like this, even though now it's an over 20-year-old design. There were a lot of technological marvels in this BMW when it came out, which I'll show you. Most of them are still left today. So let's start the tour. Now, before this model, BMW's tagline, their slogan for decades, was the ultimate driving machine. And they are still fantastic driving cars, but that became a little bit less of the focus. Now, the Bangle Butt, a lot of people thought was controversial and very, very strange looking, but nowadays it sort of fits right in with the design of today's cars. But the biggest departure from older BMWs, which focused more on the driving experience and the quality of the car and less on technology, well, that's the word. Technology was out of control in the 745. So you look inside and it is totally different from the cars that came before it. Actually, there's one right above here, a BMW 530, the E46 chassis, but inside you can see all the gizmos you could throw at a car in 2002. The key is right here. We no longer have a key, we just have a fob. Now, this car didn't have a keyless go system yet. We were a few years away, but you did have to plug the key in here and then hit the brake and the start button to start up the car. No danger of that happening here. This thing's been sitting for a good long while. But if the battery did happen to go dead on these cars, which they would happen with all the electronics, you could push this button and it pops out the shank key to get into the door or the trunk to jump the car off. Now you see all the seat adjustment here. This is where things started to get challenging for BMW because a lot of people weren't used to electronics with these cars, and then the ergonomics, it was a lot to get used to. So this knob would change a lot of the settings in the seats forward and backwards. These buttons, all they did was have you select the area of the seat that you wanted to change, and then you use this knob to make the change. So it was a series of several buttons you had to push to make any kind of adjustment to the steering wheel as well, and people really didn't like that. It's much simpler to just put it on the side and you just knew where to reach without even looking. With this, you really have to think about it to adjust the seat. Now, the center console did have a beautiful opening, and this one, well, even has the Motorola StarTech in here, the vintage flip phone that plugged in. That is super cool. The Motorola time port. Look at that. Wow. But also in the technology was the first generation iDrive system that was unveiled in this car in 2002. And that's what this wheel is right here. It would go up to one of the first ever infotainment systems up in this screen right here, and this knob controlled all of it. Now, it was cool in some ways where if you reached the end of a menu, it would actually quit scrolling, it would lock to where you couldn't go further, so it was interactive in that way, but very complicated ergonomically. At least you had a volume knob right here and a way to turn things quickly on and off or eject your CD, but if you wanted to change radio stations, it was quite a thing to have to flip through all the knobs and menus just to change a radio station. Here you have part of the car phone as well. Cool little James Bond style thing to dial up somebody. But climate control all up here. Fairly easy in that sense, along with the power locks and the hazard button. But inside you have the glove box right here. And then this would have been the ejector for the 6-disc CD changer, all built into the dash. Very, very futuristic for 2002. Now the cluster, mix of old and new here. You have analog dials, but behind it are LED screens. These have faded in a very strange way. And if you wanted to change the configuration, that's what these buttons did right here, where you could toggle through the right screen and the left screen on the turn signal itself. The shifter was also a new thing for 2002. Very common to see nowadays, a little stock here. But in 2002, this was pretty new stuff. We didn't have a center shifter. Automatic wipers down here, and then you have the cruise control. Once again, you would think this would adjust the steering wheel, but you actually have two ways to do it, I believe, here and here as well. So a very, very techie car, a big departure from BMWs that came before it. People talk about how much they hated these things, but from a sales standpoint for BMW, these were a massive, massive success. Sales were double or tripled what they were from the 2001 model year, which people say is the last of the real BMWs, the 740i Sports, the 745, a huge hit sales-wise. So you really can't fault BMW. In the end, they made the right choice, I suppose. Now, under the hood is a 4.4-liter V8, and you can see a lot of plastic covering this thing. Horsepower was right at 325, so not bad for these things. This one is dead because of a transmission issue, but the engines had a few common failure points. The timing chains, which was common with the older BMWs, but this one also had an issue with valve seals. You can see a lot of these old BMWs still on the road. They sit at a stoplight for a while. As they go off, a puff of smoke comes out the back. That's because of the failed valve seals. In the valves, they're letting some oil get passed from the top end, getting into the combustion chamber, and it burns off. So a very common problem. If this engine's still good, that's worth selling to somebody versus having to go through all of it. You can see the ABS pump over there, the coolant expansion tank, but mostly everything here covered by plastic panels to make things look pretty. Mechanically, not much to work on, at least to look at without taking a bunch of panels off, but for quick little maintenance things like adding washer fluid, adding power steering fluid, they made it relatively easy. So what do you think of the Bangle Butt? Was it ahead of its time and now a car that makes sense, or are you still bitter about this thing being the car that ruined BMW? I sort of have mixed feelings about it, but I own an M6 myself with this big clunky rear end, so I might be a little biased. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe to Banyante's YouTube channel. Continue to watch his videos as he has a chance to heal up and get back to you.